you're watching this video, you may be in the process already of buying your first property, or maybe you're selling your first property and this didn't happen when you bought your first one. And the video is going to be called, some low appraisal solutions. So, for example, I made this huge, checklist kind of way to go about things on how you can handle the situation. So let's just say, for example, the agreed upon sales price is $200,000 and the bank came in with an appraisal of $180,000. That's how much they want to give out a loan to. That's what they think it is worth. So this $20,000 here, this gap, the appraisal gap, what's next? How do you solve this problem? Okay? Well, there's many different things, and the first thing is the seller comes down in price. Now, the seller lowers the price to the appraised value. This one might be a tricky one, but there's a shot where the seller, depending on the situation, may see this and bring the sales price all the way down to 180 so that the deal can close to solve that problem. Okay? Maybe the seller lowers some of the sales price, in quotation marks, negotiations. Okay? Maybe the seller comes down from 200 maybe to 190 and the buyer brings an extra 10K to close the gap. Okay, maybe that's one thing. Now I put leverage. What kind of leverage do we have here? Leverage is very crucial in this situation. Okay? Now, maybe the seller is already set to move in a couple weeks. Alright? And, maybe it's like this house is contingent on buying the next one. Right? So they need the funds from this sale to buy their next property. If they don't have the funds, well then they can't even continue forward. So they have absolutely no leverage and they need to make this work. Maybe if they had more leverage, instead of going all the way down from 200 to 180, if they had more leverage, maybe they go from 200 to 190 and the buyer fills in that gap. That's one way to go ahead and solve this problem. The seller brings down the price. Now, the buyer, maybe the buyer covers the gap. Okay? Maybe the buyer brings that extra $20,000 to closing to fill in the gap that's needed. Maybe the buyer covers some, and I put in parentheses, negotiations. Okay? It's the same thing as the seller. What kind of leverage do we have? Did we already tell our landlord that this is our last month, that we're done? We don't actually have a place to really stay. If so, and we do have funds in reserves. And what's very crucial when it comes to leverage points is that's why you gotta be very quiet and on giving away your motivations, I feel like. Because if either or, the seller or the buyer knows your true motivation, they'd be more hesitant to give you the the fair deal. If they know, like for example, if the buyer knows that the seller is already moving in 2 weeks after closing, the buyer may not get in negotiations and cover the whole spread. But they'd be like, well, this is the deal, man. This is tough luck here for you. And all of these situations we're going to talk about under the contingency of appraisal. So what that means is there's in the contract, the purchase agreement contract, there's a check where an FHA or conventional and whatnot, if it's contingent on financing on the appraisal. So if the appraisal here is 180, okay, that doesn't reach the 200,000. So we have a way out of the contract without losing our deposit or earnest money. So we're going to pretend this whole situation is in that contingency. So that's where we're at right now when we're talking about all this stuff. Now, the buyer usually has a lot of, I feel like, leverage in this situation sometimes. Because, just think about it, the seller, they pulled their property off the market. Maybe they're 25, 30 days already under contract, and this happens. If they cancel and put it back on the market, the next buyer's gonna be like, well, what the heck happened? It was already on the market for 30 days. Now it's off the market for 30 because under contract. It's like, what happened? And the seller may not want to be in that situation. Maybe they do. maybe they don't care when the property sells, but they're, most of the time, I feel like the buyer would have a lot of leverage in most situations because of that sole reason right there, is that the seller pulled it off the market to get under contract, and now if they put it back on, people are going to question, like, is a structural problem, what did it appraise at, how far off are we? There's all many things that potential buyers are going to think about when it comes to the seller pulling it off the market and putting it back on. Okay, another thing that you can do is concessions. Okay, the seller lowers their concessions if they lower the price. So let's just say the seller was going to give a $5,000 credit to the buyer for closing, or maybe it's $3,000. This is 5 or 3. Just pick your poison. $5,000, $3,000 for concessions. Okay, well now instead of that concession, maybe they lower the price from $200 to $195 if the buyer, brings that 15 to closing. Right? There's so many different things that you can do. You can mix and match all these things. Maybe you're going to give a couple thousand for an inspection, something that came up with an inspection for a credit for the buyer. Maybe you get rid of this to lower this to help cover the spread. And all of these things can play in at the same time. Now, this is another thing to talk about too when it comes to PMI on your mortgage payment. Do you fall out of that 20%? Okay, because on most loans, if you don't put that 20% down on the loan, you're paying PMI on that loan. Do you fall out of that 20%? Okay, and how does that affect your comfortability on payments? Something to think about, when it comes to getting negotiations at the final end of the day. Another thing you can do is have a reappraisal. For example, maybe they missed a bedroom. Things happen. We're all human. Okay? Maybe they just had a miscalculation. They just didn't really grab the best comps. It can happen. We're all human. Maybe we just get another appraisal, kind of see like, how did you come up to this price? We thought, we did our due diligence, we did our research, we think that 200 is, fair for both sides. How did you get this? Can you please do it again? Pay for another one. That things happen, human. And lastly, cancel agreement. This is the last case scenario. And I just put, all parties want the deal to go through. So you'll have realtors helping out their clients, you have the buyer, the seller, they have all these people trying to make this work, to try to figure this out, because no one really wants to, go through this again, depending on motivation. The seller may not care. They may not care. They might say, you know what, it's okay, we can put it back on the market, we're not really in a rush, and we feel like, well, we just already had an accepted offer, we feel like we can have someone that has more reserves to cover this spread right here. There's many different things. You can mix and match all of these to try to negotiate and try to get that perfect way to close this gap. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We covered a lot on this video. I can talk about a lot more if you think, Tanner, I want you to talk more about the concessions on how we can close the appraisal gap. Perfect. Drop a comment, let me know. I'll make a video specifically on that, dive more in detail. But thank you for watching. Hopefully I did a good job and explained, the situation. If not, let me know about it. I'll try to be better on it, and thank you for watching.